There we go. Alright, how's that? Can you see me? Hello? Good to see you again. Today, we have a spooky story for you. So, sit back and enjoy. Now, I don't claim to be a believer in the supernatural, but there's some real strange things that go on here in the Hollow. Not much stays secret in a town like this. The townsfolk are as thick as thieves and constantly gossiping to one another. Whether it's the mayor and his sometimes questionable decisions with leading the town, a couple getting into a heated argument, a newcomer rolling by, and even the hushed sightings of people around these old roads and forests, making them a certified crazy person in the eyes of the other residents. Usually, I just go with the crowd and label those people with wild stories as just having a few screws loose. You couldn't ask for a more perfect example of this than a man by the name of Crazy John. He lives over there off of Crooked Creek. One of the only residents in that part of town, actually. People that move out to Crooked Creek, those few that are as kooky and as crazy as John himself, seem to only stay there a few months before unexpectedly just up and leaving. I was able to catch one of those fleeing families, actually. A nice bunch they were, while I was in that part of town for some errands, and asked them a few questions out of curiosity. I remember saying to the man, "It's a shame to see you go, but I don't blame you. Not a lot going on in a town like this. If you don't mind me asking, though, why the hurry to get out of here?" Now, that man, I presume, was the father of the family, and up until that point he had been pleasant and smiling while we were conversing. But all of a sudden, he had changed his mood when I brought up them leaving. His face contorted into what I can best describe as a look of terror and disbelief. His shoulders shuddered a little, and he shook his head while straightening himself back up. His response was short and slightly hostile. "This place ain't right. For us. Now I've got to get back to packing now." And with that, he walked away without another word. I could tell there was more to his decision to whisk away his family so fast, but I wasn't going to push it, as it now seemed like I was not welcome there anymore. People have their reasons, and who am I to judge and prod? It's just one of the many stories I've heard over the years with that Crooked Creek. But Crazy John, well, he's lived there for as long as I can remember, and good Lord, some of the stories I have heard from that man would make your head spin. If I didn't know any better, I'd say those woods and empty houses that surround him, with their dirty windows and overgrown yards, like something out of an apocalypse scene, might have scrambled his brain. Being away from others for so long can do that to you. I read about that somewhere. I think. Anywho, he still shows up in town sometimes, usually to pick up food or supplies in his beat-up old pickup. Either that, or he's screaming down those mountains in that dirty truck, wailing at the mayor with another tall tale. He'd shout at the mayor, "I'm telling you, Mayor Adams, I saw them out there again in the fog last night. They was just floating there all quiet like, and I didn't hear a peep from them, and oh God, they were so bright. 3 of them, glowing orange like a fire, but I didn't smell nothing either. You gotta do something about them, Mayor. They're getting closer to the house too, and it don't matter how many warning shots I give, they just sit there. I can feel them watching me, Mayor. It's like they're waiting for something." Mayor Adams, bless his heart, has heard this story probably half a dozen times by now. "Calm down, John," he would say, holding his hands up all cautious-like. "We've been over this. There's nothing out in those woods. What you're seeing is likely some sort of reflection or trick of the light." John would lurch backwards as if dodging some sort of invisible attack. "It ain't no trick. I know what I saw. They're out there." And back and forth they would go until, finally, the mayor would cave and promise John to send a patrol car out there to check it out. And, of course, there was never anything out there, and this cycle continued on and on and on. Well, that was up until that young man went missing over there in the mountains. He couldn't have been more than 21 or 22 years old. I never got his name, though. But from what I heard, he had come through the hollow looking to stock up on some supplies before taking a hike up in the mountains. This time of year, the scenery up there on the tops is really beautiful. So we usually get people like this every so often. It's not for the faint of heart, though. We get tons of fog out here in the hollow. And sometimes it's so thick that you can barely see 20 feet in front of you. Now, pair that with walking through a forested mountain, and you're bound to get lost if you don't know your way out there. That's the official story from the sheriff, anyhow. The thick fog came through late into the afternoon and evening and likely confused the man, and he's out there wandering around, he had said. Though not everyone was convinced. Multiple people that night of the disappearance called into the police office saying that they had heard what sounded like a man screaming in panic. Some said it went on for several minutes before it suddenly stopped. Others said it lasted for maybe an hour. No one really knows for sure how long it went on, but there is one thing that all the reports had in common. All of them said they heard it coming from the mountain, over near the Crooked Creek. The sheriff ignored the questions of the townsfolk and the local newspaper about the reports. It really seemed like something more had happened to that poor man, but whatever it was, the Hollow police were not keen on the town knowing. Maybe it was to keep people from panicking. Who's to say? To make things worse, one of those reports that night came from Crazy John himself on his old landline. "Them lights are back. I can see them out there in the fog. And I hear screaming. I can't take it anymore. I'm going out there. Someone might be hurt." There was a long pause on John's end of the phone, and when he spoke again, it was almost in a whisper. "I swear, them lights are getting brighter." That night, it wasn't just the hiker that went missing. No one could find John anywhere either. For days, the police and volunteers searched the mountains for the both of them, turning up nothing but dead leaves and overgrown hiking trails. After a week of no sight of the two, John and the hiker were listed as missing. The searches continued for a while after that, but volunteers slowly dried up and the police started slowing down their search, till everyone just accepted that they were gone, swallowed up by the forest. It's not the first time the town has had stories like this, but this one really shook a lot of people. Crazy John is as old as some of these buildings. He's essentially a walking piece of history, a landmark, if you will, in this place. To see him just vanish like that didn't sit right with people. 2 months after they had gone missing, one of the officers was doing his routine checks around the town, making sure there was no funny business going on, and on his way through Crooked Creek, he couldn't believe what he had saw. Out there on his porch in a rocking chair sat Crazy John himself, with eyes as big as saucers and a loaded shotgun in his lap. After the officer called in the sheriff and they convinced John to put down the gun, they asked him, "Where have you been?" To this day, his response still sends shivers down my spine. Those ain't just lights out there. I tried to stop them, but God, they were so tall and silent. I never even heard them sneak up on me. Those things, they took me, and I don't know. I just remember waking up in my backyard. Sheriff, those things ain't human. John's return created quite the stir in the town, but after a while, most people just chalked it up to John making up another one of his stories. That poor man. He's had a hard life as it is, and to go through something like that, whether it's real or not, is just plain awful. I never did find that hiker, though. His missing poster still stays hung up in the police office, all faded and yellow from time, with the hopes that someday something will point to him being found. Next time you're out hiking, make sure to keep an eye on that fog. And if you ever see those fiery orange lights in it, floating along silently, maybe it's best to get out of there. Stay safe.